Am I the asshole for wanting to report my doctor, who is my sister's best friend, for telling her I'm on Vivance, a HIPAA violation? My oldest sister's lifelong best friend has been my doctor for a couple of years. Initially my doctor, Dr. A, was a colleague of hers from the same clinic, but after my doctor, Dr. A, was away on maternity leave, I temporarily switched to my sister's friend, Dr. B, as my primary physician, and it's been that way since the pandemic began and I never switched back. I have ADHD and get prescription meds for it and have been for a few years now, something I haven't shared with any of my family members for fear of backlash since I come from a long line of type A overachievers who don't believe in ADHD and write it off as laziness. A few days ago, my siblings and I were hanging out at my sister's house watching the Matthew Perry, Diane Sawyer episode where he shares his history with substance abuse, and I made a comment about how skinny he looked during one of the seasons of Friends. My sister then, out of nowhere, says to me, "Well, it started with prescription drugs, so I hope you don't get hooked." I was instantly gripped with a feeling of absolute horror. My other siblings were confused and looking at her for further clarification, but she didn't say anything more. I spent the whole night just frozen and with a deep pit in my stomach. Later, when I found some time alone with her, I had to pry the information out of her. She had just gotten back from a girls' ski trip, and when they were extremely drunk, her friend, my Dr. B, slipped up and mentioned that she saw me recently for an increase in my dosage and basically revealed to my sister that I have been taking prescription Vivance for a few years now. I'm so livid, feel utter betrayal, and have a strong urge to report her for breaking HIPAA regulations. My sister won't stop texting and calling me about it, literally all day long, begging me not to ruin her friend's life forever after years of hard work. She's obviously worried about losing her friend, but she couldn't care less about how disrespected I feel and how my privacy was violated. And more than anything, I worry that my sister will share it with my parents and my family will never look at me or my achievements the same. ETA. A little more info. I've known Dr. B my entire life, as long as my sister has. She was my sister's friend since they were in first grade, and they've remained close, and we've hung out with our families on multiple occasions over the years. We've even gone on trips together, including my sister's bachelorette. I always looked up to her and found her cool growing up. She and my sister both have kids around the same age and they're close as well. She currently brings in the bigger chunk of the income in their family and they rely on it, and my sister keeps reminding me that I'm also ruining two innocent children's lives in the process, which is the only thing I feel guilty about. I adore those kids and they don't deserve that. But I also cannot get over how betrayed I feel. I always keep a safe distance between personal and professional relationships and would have never picked her to be my doctor had the circumstances not unfolded the way it did. She was the next best doctor and was the obvious choice because I wasn't really looking to switch to a new clinic during the pandemic. Relevant comments. OOP, on her sister's personality. Dr. B doesn't know what my sister told me yet. So far it's just been conversations between my sister and I. She's making it seem like they were so sloppy drunk that it was a slip-up and a complete one-time total accident, but I don't understand why that would even come up at all and don't believe that. My older sister flaunting sensitive info about my sibs and I is a tale as old as time. When we were kids, she would hold on to a secret she found out about one of us till the perfect moment and would thrive on dropping the bombshell to our parents during a road trip or in the interval of a great movie and ruin the entire thing. It was her thing, and I fear she hasn't fully gotten over the habit as an adult. My older sister considers herself our parent too and has always narked or used stuff as leverage against us. I used to fear her growing up and would hide my journals at my friend's house because she would snoop. Definitely lacks empathy. Update 1. Thank you for all the advice and support on my original post. After reading the feedback, I reached out to a close lawyer friend for advice as well. And he, like most of you, agreed that I should report it and to do it without informing anyone else. He said it was better for me to do it sooner to have it on record. They prefer any complaint to be filed within 180 days of when you knew that the act or omission complained of occurred. 2 days after that I reported Dr. B to OCR for violating HIPAA and Patient Safety Act and breaching my fundamental right to health information privacy. I didn't tell my sister or anyone else, but a few days later, I saw my entire family when I went home for the holidays. I hadn't heard anything back yet on my complaint, so I wasn't sure if Dr. B was aware yet, let alone tell my sister that I had reported her, so I didn't say a word. Turns out that wasn't my biggest issue at that moment though. My sister had already told my parents that I was on an extremely high dose of controlled substances. I knew my parents wouldn't take this news well, but they were far more upset about it than I could have imagined. My dad doesn't believe in ADHD and thinks it's merely an excuse for those that allow themselves to get easily distracted, especially since the age of social media. He even remarked that he noticed I was quite slow with my responses since dropping out of my chess club. Really absurd and offensive comments. I can't even remember a lot of it because I was frozen. I just sat there, nauseous and livid, with tears in my eyes, just listening to the three of them, my parents and sister, take turns going off at me. My mom wanted me to stop all medications immediately, that I'm better than this and smarter than this, and even threatened to tell your professors that you're on drugs if you leave us with no choice. But when she said that, it hit me. I had a choice. I could choose. I could choose to never have to deal with this again and to not let them treat me this way anymore. So I did. I chose to say nothing and allowed them to interpret my silence as agreeing and submitting to their ways, as I have done so many times before. And then I went to my room, chose to book a flight and pack up most of my stuff. My books would need buses of their own to be transported anywhere. The next morning, I chose to call an Uber a few hours before my flight, while they were still asleep, and flew back to my university. I chose me. In January, I found out that Dr. B had prior complaints from patients against her, and my report had opened an investigation that is currently ongoing. She's been placed on temporary leave till the case is resolved. I can't share more details on that for now, but I will come back and update once it's done. Relevant comments. Commenter 1. I also have ADHD and I studied neuroscience, partly because I wanted to understand. I also come from a family that thinks like OPs and I got the same BS from them all my life. We now finally come to be able to make ADHD visible in MRI scans. And predict the presence of symptoms with an accuracy of up to 80%. We can make visible the ways ADHD brains are different from normal brains, not in their structure but in the way they make use of it. We can see where our bodies use more oxygen and neurotransmitters, and ADHD brains are visibly different from normal ones in a way that is congruent with the symptoms. We can even tell apart the inattentive type and the hyperactive type with an accuracy of up to 75%. People who say ADHD patients are lazy and their symptoms are their own choices and character flaw are as ignorant and backwards as someone still believing the flu is caused by bad air or cancer is God's will. If this family is so smart, they are doing a really good job at remaining ignorant. With all the evidence out there, they have to really choose not to read and educate themselves and become advocates for their child and sibling, but instead actively avoid the newest scientific evidence that their opinion is stupid and they have been shitty people all along. It took me 30 years to make the step you made. Kudos on being so brave and mature while still being in college. I'm still trying to come to terms with self-doubt, imposter syndrome and depression. If you can afford it, do some therapy. Growing up in such a negative environment takes its toll even after you cut the ties. I'm proud of you. The hurdles to get to where you are today were huge and you did it all by yourself. Never forget that. Here's an article about it. This is just a small study in China, but they are happening everywhere and they all come to the same conclusion. Oop. I have tears in my eyes. I really needed to read every single thing you typed out here. I'm so tempted to send this to my family, but I don't want to interact with them right now, so I won't. I love science just as much as they do, and studying physics brings me so much purpose. I just know I need some help in staying ahead of my course and completing my assignments, and I'm finally okay with that. In the short time that I've been away from my family, I've felt so much more freedom in accepting who I am. That I am still smart and capable, and that I will still become a scientist, even if I do it my own way, and I am okay with the fact that my family doesn't approve of my choices. If they can't be bothered to listen to me, let alone attempt to learn anything about my diagnosis and try to be there for me, they aren't worth worrying over. I have spent far too much of my life doing that already. I have no more time or energy to give to that anymore. I'm channeling all of that towards me, achieving my goals and healing my trauma. Thank you for listening and for sharing. I'm so grateful for you. OP. On her family. It's their whole image. We come from a long line of scientists and many of my family members have a PhD. And as far as I know, none of them have been officially diagnosed like I have, or maybe they struggled with it secretly, but their work ethic and achievements are everything to them and they would never reveal anything that would show otherwise. It's the way we were raised and I didn't know anything else for most of my life. Anyone who couldn't pay attention was distracted in their eyes, nothing more. Commenter 2. Sad thing is, I get the feeling that you could show all of this to OP's family and it wouldn't make a bit of difference. OP. It wouldn't. You are so right. I considered it for a second, but you are so very right. I was seriously so blind for years. All I wanted was to be good enough for them. Therapy is now making me realize so many things. It's so bittersweet. My heart aches. The worst part about going no contact with your sister, missing out on getting to hang out with your niece and nephew. March 30th, 2023, 3 weeks later. I don't know how many of you have actually gone NC with your family, especially to the extent that I have currently, but I'd love to hear any advice you might have. At this point, I don't have any form of communication with my parents and older sister and haven't since December. The most awful part about this whole thing is my inability to reach out to my young niece and nephew who I'm so close to. Every year I receive a Valentine's Day card from them and this year I got none. It's incredibly lonely and I don't wish this on anyone. I'm always wondering why they think I haven't called them. As much as I'm growing and healing from this, I'm also dealing with a lot of trauma and it's rough. Relevant comments. Ope. On learning about herself. I think it's so hard for me right now because for years so much of what mattered to me was getting approval and being good enough for my family. Especially since they're all overachievers and place a lot of value in academic excellence. And to feel no support from them at a time when I could really use it. I've never felt so alone and just out of place in this world. But I'm also learning a lot about myself and how codependent I was and relied too much on their opinions to ever even form strong ones of my own. So the bright side to this is figuring myself out. Oh, on losing her sister, I've been having an extremely hard time the last few days dealing with this. I am looking forward to when I can say my life is much healthier and happier without my sister. I know it will come, but right now, I'm just experiencing so much sadness as a younger sister who looked up to my sister so freaking much. All I wanted was to be good enough for her to be proud of me or think I was worthy of her time and attention. But I'm not, and coming to terms with that is brutal. Commenter 1. It really is like grieving the death of a loved one. Therapy helps, having support helps, and being kind to yourself helps. For me, a big issue was second-guessing myself. Maybe I'm blowing things out of proportion. I should just apologize again. Those thoughts were hard to get past. Ope. I'm having those exact thoughts. I am currently in therapy and it is not easy. It seems like so much of the affection I thought I felt from my family wasn't real at all and most of it in my head. Thank you for sharing with me. It might not seem like much, but it really does help to know there are others out there dealing with similar situations. It is so hard. Commenter 2. Could I make a suggestion to you? Create an email address for them. Something like I love my nephew at Gmail and I love niece at Gmail. Then email them every time you would have sent a card or reached out. Send emails that say, Happy Valentine's Day, I miss you guys. Hey, I saw pictures, or heard through the grapevine that you did this. That's awesome and I'm proud of you. This reminded me of you today and I wanted to share. I would have the first email to the account be this is what happened between your mom and dad and I and why I'm no contact. It was never about you guys and I'm always here when you're ready to contact me. Then when they're old enough to decide for themselves, maybe 18, maybe earlier or later depending on circumstances at that point, you can give them the password OAP. This is a wonderful idea and I might actually do this. It feels like a good way to express my feelings without bottling them all up. Thank you. OAP, on trusting herself. It feels so awful to know they don't really have your best interests at heart and it's a very raw kind of pain. But you are right, I do feel more confident in my decision as each day goes by and know I did the right thing. Update 2. Thank you to every single person that has commented, reached out via DM or shared any advice with me. My ADHD and current anxiety has me extremely overwhelmed, so please excuse me for not being able to respond to each of you individually. I get quite a few questions every day about any update with the case. I'm not sure how so many of you are still finding this post, but I really appreciate everything you've said to me to help me get through this. I'm sorry I can't answer any questions right now. Please know that once I have enough to share or any real information, I most certainly will, but for now, there isn't much. The only thing I can share is that I am currently working with an attorney well versed in HIPAA violations who is handling the matter on my behalf. We have received a notice regarding the outcome of the investigation from the OCR, which I am not allowed to share yet. I'm not sure if we, along with the other patients who faced breach of privacy from the same doctor, will be suing because that's usually the most unlikely outcome since it almost always falls on the employers rather than the doctors. I've been told we might proceed with a civil claim. There's a lot of bureaucracy involved and it seems quite complicated, so I don't have a timeline on what to expect yet. I'm just grateful to have a lawyer that knows what they're doing. Thank you for your support. It's been the most hardest and lonely period of my life and your kind words helped me get through it. Relevant comments. Commenter 1. Hey, it sounds to be a good update so far. How did the situation with your family turn out? Did they contact you? I hope you're emotionally okay and have the time to heal. OP. My mom has tried to contact me a few times but I haven't answered. My dad and sister haven't. I have checked in with my other 2 siblings a few times, when I've just been so incredibly lonely that it feels like the world is ending. I am not emotionally okay at all. I'm going to therapy and getting help for it, but processing trauma is a very hard and painful process. I can't explain to you in words how it feels to have a stranger make you realize your family has never loved you at all. As much as my older sister was a bully to me, in some twisted way, she was my idol growing up and all I wanted was to make her proud of me. I never felt worthy of her time or attention back then and never did even as an adult with many achievements. And to know she would pick her friends in a heartbeat over me, it really was such a painful stab in my back. I know things will get better. I feel it in waves. I am finding confidence in little things every day. I just found out that my family cut me out of their insurance plan and I no longer have access to health coverage including my prescription meds for ADHD or therapy, both of which I really need right now. What are my options? May 24, 2023, 1 month later. I'm a full-time student under the age of 26, and my health insurance so far has been included in my family's plan under dependent coverage extension. A few months ago I went NC with my family after they found out I was on prescription Vyvanse for my ADHD, something they absolutely do not believe in, and refuse to support me. 2 weeks ago, I found out that they have taken me off their health plan and have pretty much left me to fend for myself. I haven't been able to get my meds this month and it has been awful. Since I study full-time, my only means of income is a part-time TA job on campus which is currently on hold since the semester has ended and some tutoring I do during my very limited free time. I'm struggling and on the verge of a mental breakdown and could use any advice I can get. What options do I have to get some health coverage or any assistance whatsoever? Sorry if this has been hard to read, my eyes fill up with tears anytime I try to type this out. Relevant comments. Commenter 1. What QLE did they use to drop you? Is one not required on the marketplace plans to experience a life event to drop an enrollee mid-year? OP. Dependent no longer eligible because of full independence, is what I was told. I'm currently involved in an ongoing lawsuit due to a HIPAA breach by my doctor. It's caused a major rift between my family and me since the doctor is the best friend of my older sister. Hence the NC and probably why they did this. Commenter 2. You most likely will be able to get Medicaid. Do you have a local Department of Social Services you can go to? OP. Would I be able to qualify for Medicaid independently even though my family has a high disposable income? I'm financially independent but have been on their plan my whole life until last month. I've reached out to a few that were recommended by my university but since my official address is out of state, where my parents are, I'm having to get those sorted first. Commenter 3. Make sure they're not claiming you as a dependent on their taxes still, but generally yes. It's not based on your family's income since you're not a minor and don't live with them. OP. I hadn't even considered this. I need to look up how to check if they're claiming me as a dependent. Thank you for pointing this out. My final update. Farewell and thank you for your support. I hope you read this. June 6, 2023, 2 weeks later. Hello everyone, I want to express my deepest gratitude to all of you who have reached out, offered advice or a safe space for me to be heard, and provided unwavering support during my time here. Your kindness has been a guiding light in what has been the absolute darkest time of my life. I was so incredibly lonely after making the difficult decision to go no contact with my family. However, amidst this awfully painful period that I wouldn't wish on anyone, I discovered a newfound sense of belonging provided by all of you compassionate strangers on Reddit. To those of you that were proud of me, I cried a long cry for every single time I read those words and I will carry them with me till the very end. Science is my purpose here. I will rise again and hopefully help change this world for the better someday. As I embark on a healing journey, I've decided to take a step back from here. As someone navigating ADHD, I can sometimes become overwhelmed with feedback. Therapy has taught me the importance of focusing on my mental well-being, and given the financial challenges I'm facing and ongoing legal issues, I will be working 2 jobs to make ends meet and afford the healthcare and stability I need while I'm off from school. I cannot express how much your support has meant to me, but at this time, I must prioritize my responsibilities and take care of myself. Till I'm back, I want to leave you with a quote that resonates deeply within me. Pass on the kindness of strangers, for they have the power to mend the broken and inspire the lost. From the bottom of my heart, I thank you for becoming the family I needed when I felt most alone. May your lives be overflowing with happiness, love, and success. Take care. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you. Evicted by my parents, I secretly bought their house and tripled the rent to rewrite my own destiny. Things began to go downhill, or uphill, depending on your perspective. I worked part-time in a low-paying grocery store at 22 to finish my degree. Tom and Linda, my parents, pressured me like they owned my life. Every day, they pushed me toward their ideal life. They thought they knew best yet didn't know my wishes. I stealthily eat my mom's overcooked meatloaf at dinner on Thursdays. Though it felt like chewing cardboard, I didn't say anything for fear of a sermon on my ungratefulness. Dad abruptly asks, "How's that business degree?" In his usual concerned dad manner. Though preparing, I knew this talk would happen. My stomach fell as my heart raced. Rip off the bandage. I set my fork down, staring at the clump of peas I'd been pushing around my plate like a 5-year-old. About that, I shakily responded. I've contemplated changing majors. Room fell silent. The hallway clock ticked. Then I knew what was coming. Changing majors? My dad nearly gags on food. Only when angry would he glow scarlet. Yeah, I want to switch to computer science, I said, trying to communicate clearly. It felt like a firing squad. Before I finished, my mom answered sarcastically. Jake, thinking never been your strong suit, she joked, smiling tightly. We all knew it wasn't. She often jokes pretending to laugh. Sat there swallowing rage. I wanted to yell at them and tell them they were wrong, but I knew better. There would be more ranting, and I didn't want an argument. Dad continued. His fork shook the plates as it hit the table. Computer science, are you crazy? Business makes money. That foolish hobby is ruining your future. Tried to explain. It's not a pastime, Dad. Like it and think I can do well. You think? He disconnected again. Passion costs nothing, Jake. You're reckless. Think forward instead of doing what you want now. My mom agreed, feeding the fire. No more childhood. Don't play with your future. They didn't care about my wishes. As a project, any deviation from their design meant ruining it. Nobody considered that I might know what was best for me. After dinner, I collapsed on my bed after slamming the door. Like a burden on my chest. Calling Ashley on my phone. She alone understood my condition. How did it go? She asked, knowing the outcome. Like a freaking disaster, I murmured, rubbing my eyes. I told them, and they went berserk. Like I told them I was skipping off to join a circus. She responded by sighing. Jake, defend yourself, your life, not theirs. You owe nothing. Yes, but they're my parents. Not that easy. I get it, she muttered. But Jake, you're 22. No more childhood. Own your life or they'll run it for you. While staring at the ceiling, I realized she was right. I should act like a grown-up. The next morning, I felt dread and resolve as I informed them honestly that they could no longer dominate my life. My pulse raced as I went downstairs and discovered them watching TV in the living room. Mom, Dad, we need to talk, I said shakily but firmly. After my dad muted the TV, everybody looked at me like they expected big news, which it was. Switching to computer science. Dad frowned. You're not. I persisted this time. I chose this as an adult. I hoped they would give me it, but Mom stood up with her arms crossed. If you're an adult, you can support yourself, she said coldly. You have 24 hours to pack and leave. I was riveted, like my brain couldn't comprehend what she said. What? I succeeded? You can't be serious. My dad snaps. Oh, we're serious. You want to decide? Fine. You're doing it alone. I forget my walk back to my room, but I felt betrayed, like they were looking for an excuse to push me out. I was their son, but they treated me like garbage. I called my best friend Mike from my room without trying to talk well. I said, dude, they kicked me out, shaking my hands. I don't know what to do. Mike immediately said, pack your stuff, man. Stay with me. I discovered it while packing my clothing in a duffel bag. My parents threw me away like trash. Despite how bizarre it sounds, I felt relieved. They no longer controlled me. Not sure what that meant. I slept in Mike's house trying to figure out what happened after getting expelled, but it felt like my life had changed. From fighting with my parents about my major to being homeless felt unreal, like someone else was experiencing it. I didn't mind Mike's one-bedroom apartment that smelled like stale pizza and exercise socks because I had a roof and a friend who wouldn't ask me to leave. I couldn't crawl to my parents for help because it was too cramped. Every movement made Mike's old couch rattle where I slept. Every time I finished my homework, my mind would replay what happened. It seemed like my mind wouldn't let me forget I didn't have a home. My savings were draining fast, and I needed to work more. I couldn't balance 2 jobs, school, and life decisions. Ashley recommended we eat lunch at a cheap sandwich cafe near Mike's to relax after she couldn't fix my problem. As I hadn't eaten much since leaving home, I figured going out might help. How are you doing? She inquired, eating her sandwich. I shrugged. Honestly? Not good. I can't concentrate at school, and my money is running out. I doubt I can continue. She gave me the compassionate look everyone has given me since I told them what happened. Jake, you're trying. Just a blip. Joyless laughter. Yes, a mountain-sized bump. She held my hand across the table. You'll understand. You've always been brilliant, even if your parents don't know. Her kind words didn't change the fact that I was stuck in a situation I couldn't escape. I felt like I was treading water to avoid drowning. After lunch, I worked on my assignments at Mike's, but as I looked at the computer screen, I realized I was getting behind. My grades were decreasing, and I was considering dropping out. I didn't want to, but other options were running out. After several weeks of no improvement, my money fell, and I realized I had to choose. Mike could only cover so much, and I couldn't keep freeloading on him. Leaving college seemed like giving up all I'd worked for. Signing the paperwork in the dean's office made me feel like a failure. My aim of being the first in my family to graduate college was disappearing like everything else. After leaving that office, I realized I had no degree, strategy, or money. I gazed at my phone on Mike's couch that night, unsure what to do. Ashley always called to check on me. Now the plan? She whispered. I keep looking for work, but nothing comes through. Like every door is closing on me. My caller hesitated, clearly trying to cheer me up. You won't give up? I don't have a choice, I said, trying to speak clearly. Today I dropped out. Oh, Jake, she said. The end is not here. Find something. I know you will. I wanted to trust her but was losing hope. For days, I applied for every job I could find, but Sunnyside Restaurant, a decrepit restaurant that hadn't been cleaned since the 1980s, was the only one that offered anything. Flipping burgers and mopping floors was better than nothing since I needed money. I had something despite the long hours and minimal money. Earl, my manager, barked directives like boot camp as I pounded grease-covered burgers on the grill. Maybe Earl witnessed my hard work. He was tough and only cared about money. After a month at the diner, Earl approached me during a break. Nice work ethic, child. Want more hours? My forehead was sweaty, so I wiped it off to look engaged. My friend needs a better paying night guard at this downtown office building. You in? No consideration required. Yes, I'm in. Flipping burgers by day and guarding an empty building at night, though unglamorous, it was something. I stopped affording sleep and was exhausted most nights, barely able to open my eyes, but I had to survive. Ashley kept sending me links to tech internships to get me back on track, but I didn't have time or energy to apply. I live for survival now. Every night, as I sat in that dark, empty office building staring at the city's flashing lights, I wondered, how did my life become this way? A few months earlier, I had aspirations and a future. Now I was surviving one shift at a time. The worst part was seeing no way two jobs were hell. The cafe was filthy and the nights in that empty office building were mind-numbing. I lived in a beat-up knapsack, slept 4 hours a night, and sipped energy drinks like water. I was making money, not much, but enough to keep me going. Mike didn't say anything, but I think he was glad I could help with rent. I didn't want to be the guy freeloading off my closest friend as my life went apart, so I handed him everything. A random meet things changed quickly when this guy came in for lunch while flipping burgers at the diner. I don't know if it was chance or the universe providing me a break. First, I didn't notice, just another customer. He looked fatigued, like the rest of us who worked too many hours for inadequate pay. After supper, he paid at the counter and gazed at the computer screen behind the register as I gave him his change. I practiced coding on break to keep sharp. He asked casually but suspiciously, "You're into coding?" I nodded, trying not to look thrilled. I taught myself. Hopefully it will be a career. I could have something for you. My organization requires entry-level IT professionals. Not fancy, but a start. I blinked, questioning what I heard. Seriously? Yes. He shrugged. Send me your resume, I'll represent you. I accepted his business card shaking, hoping for a bit of hope after months. That night, I ignored my double-shift exhaustion and started my laptop resume, which was imperfect but something. I wrote Mike before overthinking it and trying not to get hopeful. Turning point. After a few days, I believed he was being nice and I wouldn't be called. One afternoon, while working my night shift in that dreary, abandoned office building, my phone buzzed. It was a company email. I hesitated to open the screen before responding with an interview invitation. It was shocking to go from flipping burgers and guarding vacant buildings to perhaps working in IT. I rode the bus to work after stealing Mike's fine clothing and joining a modest, unassuming business that appeared like a new planet after a basic interview. Trevor from the diner greeted me at the door and introduced me to Tina, his supervisor. Tina was fierce but fair. I informed her I had self-taught coding and IT without a degree. She was first disappointed by my small efforts, but she then asked me to fix a technical issue promptly, which I had never done. I panicked, but then I remembered all those late evenings I spent training and coding challenges for fun. I exhaled slowly and worked, trying not to feel pressurized. After I finished, Tina nodded and gazed at Trevor without saying much. She said, "He's got potential. Give him a shot." Despite feeling like my heart was ready to explode, I tried to stay cool. New beginning the following week, I started as an entry-level IT person. It wasn't glamorous, but I didn't care. For the first time in months, I wasn't selling burgers or guarding scary office buildings at 3 a.m. I was doing something I enjoyed for the first time in months, and Tina and Trevor patiently taught me and encouraged me to study. Not being held hand through everything was perfect. To prevent losing this opportunity, I worked at the startup all day and went to the diner or office at night. Sleep was rare, and most mornings I felt like a car had hit me. I couldn't have survived without Ashley, who gave me job leads and checked on the startup. She reminded me that I was building something for myself when I felt like I was falling apart. After months of beating, I broke. I couldn't work 2 jobs and be sane, so I quit. Earl was sad but understood. "Good luck, kid," he said earnestly. "You work hard. You'll be fine." It was amazing to leave the diner. I worked security nights when I wasn't at the business, but I wasn't burning out as fast. Over time, I dedicated every free moment to IT, acquiring new skills, performing projects, and absorbing knowledge. I was constructing something genuine, mine. I wondered if I was following a pipe dream, but every time I overcame a challenge or solved a problem that had stumped me for hours, that spark returned. Long missing fire. It took time for me to see my future again. I wanted my future, not my parents'. First time in years, that was enough. Some months into the new job, things felt different, not bad, just different from what I had felt in a while. Finally doing something I liked. I wasn't going to a dead-end job. Code and fix it were fun, but not glamorous. Get something I worked hard for. Tina went to my workstation one afternoon while I was programming. I loved her directness. She said, "Jake, I've been following your work for months. You have promised yet are holding back." I glanced at her, shocked. "Holding back? You mean what?" She crossed her arms and looked like she knew the answer but wanted me to say it. "You're talented, but you're cautious and adhere to familiarity. You lack risk-taking and pushing. Being comfortable is good, but comfort doesn't work in business." I was unclear what to say. She was right, I was doing the work, but not well. After everything, I was grateful to be stable and not mess up. Tina replied, "Look, Jake, you're good, but you need to improve to stand out. Try scary projects. You grow that way." I nodded, still understanding her words. This wasn't my parents' counsel to quit wasting my ability. This individual saw it and encouraged me. I followed her advice and volunteered for harder jobs I wasn't sure I could handle. I occasionally felt overwhelmed, but solving an issue was worth it. Tina handed me a big client job. I was scared since it was more responsibility than I'd ever had, but I was excited to prove I could do it. After weeks of late nights, weekends, and free time to perfect the project, I felt like I had run a marathon. I was exhausted, but I felt stronger. Several days later, Tina invited me into her office. I sat down, anxious about making a mistake. She acted swiftly. "Jake, your client liked your work. Every suggestion you made is being implemented." Unknowingly, I exhaled. "Really?" She nodded with a little smile. "You did great. Keep going and you'll succeed." Leave her office and I felt 10 feet tall. I thrived for the first time in forever and saw a future of building instead of scraping by. As I pushed harder, I understood how much I was holding back, not only in my career but in life. This cloud lifted, and I could see what I could do if I stopped afraid. Mistakes were inevitable, but they taught and progressed me. Ashley was always supportive, but she suddenly seemed proud of me. Instead of grumbling about my poor work or money, I'd talk about my new project or something fantastic I learned at dinner. She'd listen, really listen, like she could see I was on my way. After a long week at work, we sat on her couch one night. I was exhausted but happy. She smiled. She said, "I always knew you'd get here. Maybe not as planned, but you're doing it, you make it happen." I didn't know how to answer. She was with me through the worst, when I didn't know whether I'd make rent or where my next salary would come from. She made me feel safe and valued. Hearing her say that, I understood how lucky I was. "Thanks," I said forcefully. "I don't think I'd have made it this far without you." "You would have," she laughed, shaking her head. "A push was all you needed?" She may have been right, but her presence helped. Then things got better. I took on more duties and improved, and others noticed. Every time I finished one of Tina's harder assignments, I felt more confident. For the first time in years, I felt secure. I stopped security and wasn't making much money, but I wasn't afraid about my next meal. Tina summoned me into her office again one afternoon. I expected another extravagant project, but she had a serious look I hadn't seen before. She said, "Jake, I want to talk to you about your future here." Calmly but directly. Unsure of the direction, I arched an eyebrow. "Okay." She reclined in her chair. "You've done well in recent months. I think you're ready for more. I wish to make you full-time." After she started, I sat there trying to process it. Full-time? The dream? No more juggling jobs or scraping by. I don't even know what to say. I smiled. Smiled, just say yes. Yes, I did. After leaving that office, I felt lighter. All the strain, sleepless nights, and self-doubt were worth it. I arrived, though not as planned, and that felt good. Being promoted to full-time was like visiting a new planet. For the first time, I felt like I was doing something meaningful for myself and others without working a miserable side job. It was steady. After attaining that milestone, work got frantic. Tina meant it when she said I'd get additional responsibilities. I led teams for the first time and managed impossible deadlines on larger projects. My to-do list sometimes made me worry how I would do it all, but I had to. Every day was a challenge, but it was the kind that made me feel alive. It was significant to be trusted to do the job while still learning. Tina summoned me into her office again one afternoon. Every time she did, I felt like I was in school waiting to pass or fail a test. She looked serious, and I wondered if I'd done something wrong. She added, "Jake, I've got another project for you." Pushing a folder over the desk. I took it and flipped through. The new customer was a big company modernizing its IT infrastructure. Bigger than anything I'd done before. My stomach flipped when excited and scared. "This is a lot," I said, trying to seem confident but not arrogant. "I think you're ready." Tina nods. "I need you to guide the organization through this major undertaking." Guide it? I was shocked. I worked hard, but heading a project looked advanced. I said, "I won't let you down," feeling her faith. "I know you won't," she said, smiling briefly. Next week was my busiest. I worked nights and weekends at work making sure everything was fine. My staff was excellent, but I couldn't let anyone down under pressure. Ashley was wonderful, although I was rarely around and a zombie. She brought takeout to work, sat with me, and reminded me to take breaks. "You're going to burn out if you don't slow down," she warned. I adored this idea and thought it would change my career and life if I succeeded. I had to prove myself, not Tina or the firm, that I could handle this. I barely slept the night before the client presentation, mentally double and triple checking everything to make sure there were no loose ends. I felt like all my tension and anxiety from the year had built up to this moment, and I was about to do something significant. The next morning, I entered the boardroom to find the clients in suits and ties looking serious. I put up my presentation to calm my nerves, but it seemed like my career hinged on this meeting. Tina sat at the head of the table, watching me. I breathed deeply, comforted myself, and started the lecture. I stumbled over a few words and slides, but I answered their questions, explained the idea, and showed why they required this update. During what seemed like an eternity, no one talked. They scanned the documentation and whispered. My stomach flipped, and I half expected them to take everything apart. The IT department chief said, "This looks good," nodding. "We'll proceed." I was astonished and wanted to jump up and fist pump like a fool, but I nodded like it was just another day at work, yelling with joy. Tina took me aside after the meeting. "Great work," she said, beaming. "You've earned this." Her praise or the fact that I finished my largest assignment hit me harder. I felt like I'd passed an unseen finish line. After months of work, I left the office that night, relieved. I didn't care that I'd probably be back there in the morning working on something else. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was where I should be. On my way home, I excitedly called Ashley. "We did it, babe. The presentation was well received. We're proceeding?" Pride showed in her laughter. "You would, I knew. So proud of you, Jake." Hearing that made it real. I wasn't the lost, fearful kid who'd been kicked out of his parents' house. I'd built something for myself on my terms. There was less uncertainty about the future. I thrived, not just survived. And that feeling? It was all worth it. I went from struggling to excelling in IT a few years after that big job assignment, and I was surprised when I started my own firm. After working for a while, I had a good reputation, saved money, and made connections, so I was ready to jump. Starting my own business was hard. There were restless nights, countless paperwork, and constant worry that everything might fail. I felt this was my calling, so I kept going. I got contracts, built a small but solid crew, and the company took off. After 2 years, we made more money than I expected. I didn't serve burgers or protect vacant buildings. I grew my firm every month. I had built it. Ashley and I contemplated buying a house when my company took off. After years of renting, we wanted our own home. We looked at ads, attended weekend open houses, and fantasized about our ideal home. Seeing my boyhood house, which my parents still live in, for sale prevented me from surfing real estate sites. I was surprised to discover their house for sale. I hadn't spoken to them in years and didn't follow their life. I clicked on the advertisement to learn more. Their landlord had sold the property at a discount compared to surrounding homes. I suddenly had a crazy idea. Buy the house. Who buys their parents' house after eviction? It seemed petty, but I could, but they didn't know I had money or was considering buying a property. This could be my chance to reclaim control over a situation that had kept me powerless for years. I called my realtor and placed a bid without hesitation. It was inexpensive, and I had the money to accomplish it. A few weeks later, the purchase closed, and I acquired my childhood home. Now things get interesting. The property manager called me the day after the deal. The tenants are asking to meet the new owner, said. They want to discuss the rent and some issues they've been having. I grinned internally. Good things were coming. Not telling them, I told property management to make the appointment. The plan was in my brain. After parking my car in front and knocking like a landlord, Dad answered the door. He was surprised but didn't recognize me because we hadn't seen each other in years. I didn't appear like the guy who left their house with a duffel bag and no plan. We're here to meet the landlord, he exclaimed. That's me, I said, entering like I owned it. He blinks in amazement. Wait, what? You're the landlord? Yeah, I said, trying not to laugh. I bought the place. My mom came from the living room, wide-eyed. Jake, she shouted. Why are you here? I smiled and leaned against the wall. Well, I'm your landlord now. They were speechless, still absorbing the fact that the boy they kicked out years before owned their house. Though I wasn't celebrating, it seemed fair. Business was my obligation. I began. So, breaking the awkward quiet. About the rent. They stared at me unprepared. I stated, I'm tripling it, calmly. Dad was stunned. Triple it? You're kidding. I replied, oh, I'm dead serious. Property values have risen, so I need a reasonable return on my investment. Rent is rising, a lot. Mom shook and reasoned with me, Jake, we can't afford that, you know we can't. I shrugged. That's not my issue. You can pay the new rent or move. Up to you. Though tough, I wouldn't back down. Years ago, they kicked me out, so now I set the terms. The stunned couple may have realized they had no choice but to stand there with no credit and no options. I left after an awkward talk to let them figure things out. I drove away feeling satisfied, vindicated, and hollow. I proved them wrong and succeeded despite everything they did to me, but as I drove away from that house, I realized that rent hikes and property ownership couldn't fix it. This was about release, not revenge. I wouldn't lower rent. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you. Called off my wedding after my fiancé allowed kids but banned my daughter, blaming her for ruining our engagement party by being ill. Earlier this week, Addison, 40 degrees Fahrenheit, and I, 38 degrees male, were about to tie the knot, but I abruptly called it off. For the previous 3 years, we had been together. Everything was going well until we got engaged, which was around 6 months ago. When we started talking about who we wanted to invite to the wedding, things started to go south. Naturally, I wanted my daughter to be present because I have one. Addison, however, was very clear that she did not want any children present at the wedding. Given that she has 2 children of her own from a previous marriage and 6 nieces and nephews with whom she is very close, this was an odd position. Given that the majority of those we invited were also parents, I couldn't understand why she didn't want any children at the wedding. At first, we argued about it a lot, but I finally gave in. I grudgingly agreed to keep my daughter away from the wedding, provided she didn't invite any children from her side of the family. To put things in perspective, my daughter is 14 years old, so she is not even a little child. However, Addison was unaffected by that. She informed me that she wanted a stress-free wedding and that she didn't want any exceptions, even though she loved my daughter, her own children, and even her nieces and nephews. She said that by making exclusions, she didn't want to alienate anyone who had children. I was really angry about it, but I reasoned that because she had already made up her mind, there wasn't much I could do if she really wanted a wedding without children. The actual wedding was going to be small, just a few close friends and family would be coming, and we would be being married in my parents' backyard. I decided to let it go after reasoning that the kids wouldn't be missing out on much fun. Just a few days prior to the wedding, everything changed. Kate, Addison's younger sister, emailed me while I was at work. She was requesting approval for the email, which included pictures of her 2 daughters wearing wedding-appropriate attire. I was initially perplexed. Then I saw that Kate had sent the email to our shared wedding email address, which we had set up especially for vendor communications and RSVPs. It was too late when I realized it must have been an accident. I had previously viewed and captured a screenshot of the email. I tried to check the email again a few minutes later, but Addison had already erased it. I had finally figured out what was going on by that point. Addison had claimed that there would be no children at the wedding, but in reality, she was planning to invite her own children as well as relatives and nephews, but not my daughter. I was incensed at her dishonesty. That day, I didn't say anything as soon as I got home from work. I acted as though nothing was wrong. Addison was being a little odd at first, perhaps because she thought I had read the email and figured out what she was doing. However, Addison calmed down and resumed his typical behavior once I kept everything a secret. I knew she was planning something behind my back, and this was around 2 days before the wedding. I therefore made the decision to ask my daughter about her feelings on Addison. Even before I proposed, I had discussed this with her, but since I was really reconsidering the wedding, I felt it would be best to have another conversation. In retrospect, I'm really happy I took that choice. My daughter told me that Addison had always been kind to her prior to the engagement. But after that, something had changed. My daughter clarified that she hadn't brought it up sooner because she didn't want to spoil my happiness with Addison after witnessing it. Addison, however, had been acting strangely toward her after the engagement. Addison behaved completely differently when I wasn't there whenever she came to visit. My custody agreement states that I get to spend half the month with my daughter, which is a substantial amount of time. When I got home from work, my daughter claimed that Addison would activate the charm, but she ignored her the rest of the time. Prior to the engagement, this wasn't the case. It was unexpected and disheartening to hear this. My daughter also revealed that she thought Addison no longer wanted her in her life when she learned that he intended a wedding without children. She believed it wouldn't matter, so she didn't even try to go. I felt so bad about myself for letting Addison convince me not to invite my own kid to my wedding. I made the decision to call off the wedding at that point. I talked to Addison the day before the wedding. After that, I didn't bother returning home. Addison called me multiple times, but I didn't answer. I told my parents to inform her that I would meet her on the wedding day because I knew she would get in touch with them next. I stayed with my daughter all day instead of returning home. By the end of the day, we both felt much better. I spent the night at a hotel after dropping her off at her mother's house. I arrived at my parents' house the following morning, exactly 1 hour before the ceremony was set to start. A few people had already arrived when I got there, including Addison's dad and both of her sisters, Kate and Amelia. Naturally, all 6 of their children were present, along with Addison's 2 children, who were all under 12 and running around the area. Addison hurried to meet me at the door as soon as she noticed me. She started by saying that Kate and Amelia couldn't leave their children behind, despite her having informed them that the wedding was child-free. She went on to say that her parents thought it would be odd if she married without her own children being there. I could tell she thought I was crazy because she was making up all these absurd excuses. However, I remained silent until she had finished speaking. Then she began asking me strange questions like where I had been the night before and why I was dressed the way I was. I simply got out my phone, showed her a screenshot of the email that Kate had inadvertently sent to our joint wedding email account, and laughed in her face. That was sufficient to silence her. She realized right away that she had been apprehended and that she couldn't get away with it by talking. It was already too late when she began to apologize. I informed her that I had spent the day before with my daughter and discovered that she had been treating my daughter differently for the past few months, ever since we became engaged. I didn't even want an explanation or an answer at this point. I simply informed her that we were done. She clearly did not value my daughter, therefore I made it clear that I would not marry her. I had never treated her children any differently than I had my own, so it was very painful. However, I didn't believe it was a good idea for us to get married because it was obvious that she didn't really value my family or me. I spoke up and didn't wait for her to answer. I simply left. I didn't turn around even though she was shouting for me. I had nothing better to do, so I got into my car, drove to a hotel, and napped for a long time. My phone was inundated with texts when I got up at lunchtime. Addison's family was unhappy, and everyone who had been invited to the wedding was perplexed. However, I was unable to care. I gave my friends and family a quick rundown of the circumstances and then let it go. I visited my daughter later. I informed her that I intended to spend more time with her and that I had canceled the wedding. I acknowledged that, without even recognizing it, we had begun to drift apart during the previous few months. She used to come to me right away if she had a problem with someone, so I realized something was wrong. She hadn't spoken, though, with Addison. At least we were able to work things out even if we both were a little emotional. Speaking of Addison, that's where I've been having trouble. 5 days have passed since the day we were meant to tie the knot, and by now, almost everyone is aware of the reason I called off the wedding. Her dishonesty was just as much of a factor as the way she treated my daughter. Being dishonest is, in my opinion, a major deal breaker in any relationship. I've already been cheated on twice, and I can tell you that it always begins with a simple fib. She believed that she could get away with telling such a large falsehood. I don't believe that canceling the wedding at the last minute was incorrect on my part. Yes, it was sudden and rude, but considering that she had intended to surprise me with the kids at the last minute, I believe it was reasonable. Her family feels I'm being harsh and is angry that I didn't offer her an opportunity to clarify. Addison has been contacting me constantly, as has the rest of her family. Addison's only justification is that she had good reason to invite my kid, but she couldn't beg me not come. She also finds it quite offensive that I didn't think our relationship needed at least a chat before terminating it in that manner, even after we had been together for so long. She has stated that she will discuss her reasons in person, but she has not disclosed them. How she could possibly defend her decision to not invite my daughter to our wedding is beyond me. To the best of my knowledge, she and my daughter have never had any problems together. I still believe like I ought to have talked to her first though. I've been feeling guilty for the past few days, and I'm not sure why. I believe that rather than acting as though everything was all right up until the last minute, I ought to have been honest with her. I should have gone right home from work and addressed her the day I learned what she was planned. I could have prevented a lot of the drama that is going on now if I had done that. I've been bothered by the fact that I feel like a bit of a jerk for not handling things better. Am I the jerk for abruptly calling off the wedding and not talking to my fiancé? First update. 3 days have passed since I posted, and I'm still at the motel. I contacted Addison today and informed her that she needed to vacate the house right now. Since it was my house before she moved in, I believe it is only right that she must depart now that we are done. She has till the end of the month, in my opinion, to find a place. Since sleeping in a hotel isn't a practical long-term solution, I intend to crash with a buddy until then. I feel much better about my choice aside from that. My friends have encouraged me that, in the end, I made the decision to become a father because it is what I value most. I don't believe I have to apologize for putting my daughter first. People can avoid me if they have an issue with that. I don't give a damn about Addison's motivations. I don't think I need to hear them at all if she can't send me an explanation. I'm not interested in seeing her at the moment. Since it's obvious that her parents and sister were aware of her scheme the entire time and kept quiet about it, I've also barred them. I thought I got along well with her family, so this is disappointing. Before everything that transpired, I firmly believed that I had become a member of their family. I hadn't replied to Addison much up until last night, but I did advise her to begin searching for a new residence. I also informed her that she may text me to explain why she didn't want my kid to attend the wedding. But I also made it apparent that there was no turning back once the harm had been done. She has not responded to that message. I apologize to those who inquire, but I have no idea why she would be acting in such a different way around my kid. Since I'm genuinely interested, I've talked to my daughter extensively, but she too doesn't know. My daughter was as perplexed as I was when I showed her the messages and we talked about Addison's actions. She informed me that she was surprised when Addison began acting differently around her. In the early days following the engagement, my daughter even made an attempt to patch things up, but Addison remained aloof and uninterested in her attempts. Addison appears to be the issue here, based on what I've heard. Although I am aware that many children struggle to understand their parents' separation, my daughter is not one of those children, and she has no justification for lying about Addison. To begin with, I was never married to her mother. We dated for 2 years before splitting up when she was 3 years old. She hardly recalls our time together. For the last 5 years, my ex has also been married. I have no doubt that my daughter was not at all offended by my choice to move on and wed Addison. Until recently, they had a nice connection. I'm not claiming my kid is flawless, even though she may be in my opinion, but I do know she doesn't lie, especially when it comes to something like this. She is aware of how much I respect openness and truthfulness in my loved ones. When she claims that Addison began acting differently, I genuinely believe her. Nevertheless, I doubt Addison will reveal her motivations. I texted her a few hours ago, and she hasn't responded yet. She probably hasn't received my message because she works from home and must be on her phone all the time for her job. She always responds right away, so I'm certain she's ignoring me. However, it makes no difference. All I want is for her to leave my home so I may resume my comfortable life. I have to go back to work in a few days, and staying in this motel is strange. Second update. 3 days have passed since I sent Addison a text. She did respond earlier today. She claimed to understand why I didn't want to see her face to face, but she demanded that we do so she could give me an explanation for why she didn't want my daughter to attend the wedding. Despite the fact that we are no longer together, she said she didn't want me to misinterpret her. Addison said that her reasons were legitimate and that she didn't want me to think she was the villain. She said she didn't want to hurt me, so she lied. That reasoning was absurd because she still caused me pain. I responded in less than 30 minutes, being very clear that I would not be speaking with her face to face. Anything she said had to be sent via text, and that was the end of it. She said it was around an hour ago. She stated that something that occurred at the engagement party was the reason she didn't want my daughter to attend the wedding. Regretfully, my daughter wasn't feeling well on the day of the engagement celebration. I already knew she wouldn't be able to come when it was my turn to keep her for the month. Despite feeling ill, she insisted on going even though I told her she could stay in her room. She desired to join in the festivities. She went back upstairs to relax after spending a few minutes downstairs toasting with everyone. Although some people inquired about her well-being, it didn't cause a significant disturbance. Addison went upstairs to see how my daughter was doing, but he thought she had stolen our thunder. She was chatting and laughing on the phone with a friend. According to Addison, my daughter didn't appear ill at all. Addison, who tends to stir things up, talked to her sisters about her worries rather than to me or my daughter. After the engagement, Addison started to remove herself from my daughter because of this minor miscommunication, which unnecessarily escalated. Addison persuaded herself that my daughter will eventually cause issues because she wasn't thrilled with our marriage. That one small incident was the only source of this view. When Addison told me this, I was appalled, so I didn't even bother answering her reply. I questioned my daughter about Addison's words to put things in perspective. My daughter acknowledged that she was still feeling poorly that day, but she was conversing with a friend. Speaking with a friend was merely a means of self-distraction. It did not indicate that she was not ill. Addison's logic was utterly nonsensical. I think this episode provided Addison a reason to stop acting like she was being kind to my kid, even though I think she may have been insecure from the beginning. Looking back, I'm glad I didn't wed Addison. She would have undoubtedly caused further issues along the road. In hindsight, there were further warning signs. When my daughter was around, Addison would often remark that I didn't spend enough time with her. Ironically, I never voiced any complaints, and she frequently spent comparable amounts of time with her own children. Her behavior as a parent was admirable, in my opinion. When I think back on my earlier posts, I see that Addison was a major factor in my lack of time with my kid. She quietly took up all of my attention, both mentally and practically. I was so committed in our relationship at the time that I didn't realize it. It was too late before the warning signs were noticed. I'm relieved that I was able to end that relationship at last because I didn't want to remain with someone if it meant sacrificing my relationship with my daughter. I'm not really sure how to interpret that absurd message that Addison sent me today. It puzzled me that she destroyed our connection over something so trivial, something that might have been settled with a conversation, so for a long I thought about answering her and telling her precisely how I felt. However, I changed my mind since I didn't think it was worth the hassle. Until it's time for me to go back home, I would much rather ignore her. Unfortunately, since I need my job clothing, it might happen shortly. She needs a somewhere to stay soon, I hope. Although my friends have graciously allowed me to stay with them, I really simply want to return home. Update 3. I made this post 2 days ago. I returned home earlier today to get my clothes and other necessities. I was heading to a friend's apartment and decided to leave the hotel because it was becoming too costly. I made the decision to visit the house and get everything I required. I wasn't sure if Addison would be home because I banned her and didn't respond to her messages after she sent them. Regretfully, she was present when I got there in the afternoon. She obviously wanted to talk and appeared sad to see me. I began gathering my belongings as fast as I could, intending to be done and out of there before anyone could speak. I urged her to start looking for a place so I could move back in as I was ready to leave. She apologized profusely and followed me as I made my way to my car. She claimed she shouldn't have lied or made such a huge deal out of the engagement party event, and she acknowledged that she felt awful about what had transpired. She clarified that she recently got into a battle with her sisters after understanding how their advice had led to the breakdown of our relationship and that they had made it look like a much greater problem than it actually was. Addison pleaded for another chance, saying she would improve her connection with my daughter and me. Hearing her plea made me sad, but it was too late. When I got to my car, I informed her that although I could relate to her feelings, my kid was the most important thing to me. I had a duty to act morally toward my daughter. Addison was clearly about to cry, but I didn't want to deal with it. I drove off after saying a brief goodbye and reminding her to find another home. It was far more difficult to see her in person than it was to text her, even if I felt like a bit of a jerk for leaving like that. I don't regret anything though, it had to be done. I'm staying with a friend for the time being with the hopes that Addison will find somewhere else within the next few weeks. After she leaves, I can return home and carry on with my life, or whatever normal will be going forward. Although it may take some time to get over this, the bright side is that my relationship with my daughter is stronger than it has ever been. Our relationship has returned to its pre-engagement state. There are no secrets between us. She tells me everything about her life once more. Seeing her chat eagerly about her school day over our FaceTime today made it all worthwhile. In a few weeks, we even have a beach vacation planned. I think I could use the break, so I've invited some friends with children her age to come along. Although the last few weeks have been difficult, I have optimism for brighter times to come. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.